Today, I will be reviewing two studies that looked at how three specific emotions, anger, fear, and disgust, shape memory performance. Together, the two studies show that emotion doesn't just change how strongly we remember something, but how we process it in the first place. The first article I'm going to discuss is published in 2024 by Capuccio and others, titled Recognition Memory for Specific Emotional Words, Anger, Fear, and Disgust. The study begins with the well-known finding that emotional material is often remembered better than neutral information, especially when it's negative or highly arousing. But emotions that feel similar, like anger, fear, and disgust, don't always affect memory the same way. All three emotions share negativity and arousal, however, they differ in meaning. For example, anger is approach-oriented and certain, fear is avoidant and uncertain, and while disgust is also avoidant, it has a high certainty about what should be rejected. The researchers wanted to show if those differences, those being motivation and certainty, would translate into measurable differences in how people recognize words tied to each emotion. The study took place as two online experiments in which adults between the ages of 18 and 35 years old studied lists of words related to anger, fear, and disgust, along with neutral words for comparison. After a short delay, they saw a mix of old and new words and rated them on a 6-point scale about how confident they were that each word had appeared before. Using those confidence ratings, the researchers created ROC curves, which are receiver operating characteristic graphs that separate memory accuracy from response bias. The accuracy measure is called DA, which reflects how well participants distinguish old from new words. The bias measure, or CA, captures how liberally they labeled something as familiar. This approach matters because emotion can make people feel familiarity even when real memory isn't there. In the ROC curves shown here on the right, all three emotional conditions, those being anger, fear, and disgust, shift upward and to the right compared to the neutral words. You can see the curve here in all of them. That pattern means that participants were more liberal in their responses, meaning that they said old more often to emotional words, even if those words were new. However, when we look at the accuracy, we see that anger-related words were recognized less accurately than neutral words. We can see this in the table on the left here, specifically under DA. Fear-related words were about the same. You can see that here. And disgust-related words were recognized significantly better. In the table, you can also see that the accuracy measure is highest for disgust and lowest for anger, while the CA values on this side of it drop for every emotional word, showing that general liberal bias I explained earlier. These results challenge the simple idea that emotion automatically will strengthen memory. Even though anger, fear, and disgust are all negative and arousing, they produce very different outcomes. Anger seemed to impair accuracy, probably because it encouraged quick heuristic judgments rather than deep encoding, whereas disgust improved accuracy, likely because it triggered more detailed adaptive processing that fits its role in avoiding contamination or danger. Across all three emotions, people were also more willing to claim that they recognized a word just because it felt emotionally familiar. Although the study shows that it's not just how intense an emotion is that matters, but rather what that emotion means and how it directs cognitive processing. The second article was published in 2022 by Riegel and others, titled Emotion Schema Effects on Associative Memory Differ Across Emotion Categories at the Behavioral, Physiological, and Neural level. Whereas in the first study, which focused on recognizing single emotional words, this one, however, examined associative memory, or how we remember links between emotional cues. The authors introduced the idea of emotional schemas, which are mental templates that connect elements of emotion, such as how a fearful face fits with fearful words or situations. They asked whether memory improves when those cues are emotionally congruent, such as when the face and the words share the same emotion, and whether this congruency effect looks different for disgust versus fear. To explore that, female participants studied a series of face word pairs showing disgust, fearful, or neutral expressions. Some pairs were congruent, meaning a disgust face was paired with a disgusted word, while others were incongruent, like a fearful face with a disgust word. The researchers recorded multiple kinds of data, those being behavioral accuracy and reaction time, eye tracking to see where participants looked, pupil dilation to measure as a measure of arousal and effort, and fMRI scans of brain activity while participants encoded the pairs. After each study phase, they were tested on which emotion had been paired with each word. Participants remembered congruent pairs more accurately and responded faster than incongruent ones in this study. Within those congruent conditions, disgust produced the strongest memory, while fear performed even below neutral. You can see that represented in this graph, where the darker bars, these ones here, represent the disgust congruent pairs and how they rise well above the other ones. Physiological data also supports this pattern, as well as larger pupil dilation predicting better memory for discussed congruent pairs, showing deeper engagement. Eye tracking data revealed that participants shifted their gaze back and forth between the face and the word more often for discussed pairs, meaning that they are actively integrating both cues. In contrast to that, however, fear pairs drew longer fixations on the faces alone, showing a narrower perceptual focus. At the neutral level, fMRI results revealed increased activation in the left inferofrontal gyrus during successful encoding of discussed congruent pairs. However, for fear congruent pairs, activation appeared instead in the right fusiform gyrus, which specializes in visual face processing. The study demonstrates that emotion schemas guide how we form associations in our memory. When emotional cues match, the brain can bind them together more easily, but the strength of that effect depends on the emotion we're feeling. Disgust seems to activate semantic networks, which promote deeper, meaningful base processing and strengthens associative links. In contrast, fear focuses attention on visual features, which help with the perception, but not with building connections. In other words, disgust encourages elaboration and integration, and fear encourages vigilance. That difference helps explain why disgust improved memory in both experiments, while fear had little consistent effect. When we compare the two studies, a consistent pattern appears across them. Anger reduced, we see that anger reduced accuracy and increased bias, suggesting participants relied on fast heuristic judgments. Fear maintained attention on perceptual details without enhancing recall for meaning, and disgust produced the clearest benefit, being stronger recognition for words and stronger associative memory for emotional pairs. Each emotion seems to engage a different cognitive route. Anger drives heuristic processing, fear relies on perceptual focus, and disgust activates semantic integration. Together, these findings reveal that emotion doesn't simply intensify memory, but rather it shapes how the brain remembers. These are my sources. Thank you.